Good morning, everybody, and Hazak Baruch. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. And again, welcome back, everybody, after this beautiful Haga Pesach break. We should be zocheh to have to spend many holidays together with our friends, with our family. We should go from Chayil to Chayil and carry with us all of the blessings of the holiday with us throughout the entire year. Amen. Rabotai, we are back in action, and we are studying our weekly parasha again. So, if you have a chumash, this would be a great time to grab it and open it up. We are studying Parashat Shemini. That is our parasha. That's this upcoming Shabbat. That would be in the book of Vayikra, chapter 9, Pasuk 1. So, just to get back and in context, where are we? When are we? What's going on in the Torah right now? I forgot, Rabbi, could you put me back in? Because I'm in Pesach mode right now. So here we are. The Jewish people left Egypt. That was the holiday of Pesach. They crossed the sea. We just celebrated that also on the 7th day. They get the Torah. Beautiful. That's the holiday of Shavuot. Then they sin with the golden calf. Chet ha'egel. We read about that already a couple of months ago maybe. Then we discussed the idea of the building of the Mishkan. And that's where we are right now. The Jewish people are in the desert. It's the middle of the year, somewhere around in between Yom Kippur and Nisan. Somewhere in the winter. They're in the middle of the desert somewhere. And they're building the Mishkan. When I say they're building the Mishkan, I mean they're building all of the different parts of the Mishkan, the different parts of the clothing of the Kohanim. And here we are, and we get our parasha is the inauguration of the Mishkan. Here it is. It's what we've been waiting for. The house of Hashem. And it's going to be amazing. It's going to be beautiful. There's going to be sacrifices. We're going to get atoned for the sin of the Chet HaEgel. A lot of stuff to talk about in this week's parasha. And our parasha deals with two things and only two things. Very simple. The first half of our parasha and the second half. The first half deals with the inauguration of the Mishkan, where they build it and they had a whole beautiful welcoming party for the Mishkan, for the house of God, right? And then they have the second half of our parasha, which deals with the laws of kosher and not kosher. Okay, so lots to talk about in this week's parasha. We're not going to talk about kosher today. We're going to talk about the first half. We're going to talk about the building, the inauguration of the Mishkan. And you could imagine on that day, it was a very joyous day, a lot of celebration, a lot of offerings, a lot of korbanot. And our parasha begins, chapter 9, Pasuk 1, Vayhi Bayom Hashemini. And that's the name of our parasha, Shemini. What does Shemini mean? Shemini from the word Shmone, 8. Vayhi Bayom Hashemini, and it was on the 8th day. On the 8th day, what happened on the 8th day? Well, first of all, 8th day from when? Doesn't say. It just says on the 8th day, Moshe called Aharon and his children and the Zekenim, the Ziknei Israel, and he started doing the entire inauguration of the Mishkan, the Korbanot and everything. Now, what is this 8th day? When I say 8th, that means it's the 8th of something. Pasuk doesn't say 8th of what? It just says the 8th. What were the 7 days before? Right? When I say it's the 8th day of the month, is it the 8th day of their marriage? 8th day of school? 8th day of what? So the Pasuk says, Vayhi Bayom Hashemini. It doesn't really say. But we know what it is. It's the 8th day of the inauguration, meaning the Mishkan there was a preparatory process for 7 days, and it was Moshe himself that every day for 7 days, would erect the Mishkan, he would build it up, and then take it down. Build it up, and take it down. Like Lego, okay? Imagine you get a set of Lego, right? Ninjago or whatever is hot these days. They build up the Lego, and they take it down. For 7 days, up and down, up and down, up and down. Moshe is building it, not Aharon. He's the one doing it. And Moshe is acting as the Kohen. Very interesting. Moshe is doing the services. Moshe is doing everything alone, even though he's not a Kohen. He's a Levi. It's Aharon and his children that are the Kohanim. But Moshe, for 7 days, is acting out the process. He's showing everybody how it's done. Okay? It's like, mock Seder. Trial. Your mock trial, where he's acting it out for them. And he's building it, and he takes it down for 7 days. And then on the 8th day, that's our parasha, Vayhi bayom Shemini, on the 8th day, you got the drill, you learned how to do it, good, now you give it a try. And from this day on, forever, it was Aharon and his children that were the active Kohanim, and the Mishkan, no longer like a Lego, went up and down for 7 days. Now he built it, and it stayed up. Of course, when they traveled again, they would take it down. But it remained up until further noticed. Okay? Very nice. So it turns out something very interesting. That our pasuk, the 8th day, it's not referring to the 8th day of a month. It's referring to the 8th day of this preparatory process. So for 7 days, Moshe is building, and on the 8th day, he calls Aharon, he inaugurates the Mishkan, he's anointing his children, and from here on out, the rest is amazing, and they start doing all the avodah, Aharon and his own kids. By the way, geographically, where are the Jewish people? We know exactly where they were. They were still by Har Sinai. They didn't leave Har Sinai. I don't know if you knew that. They got the Torah and they stayed there for an entire year, almost. Yeah, from Sivan till now, it's Nisan time. This is 10 months that they remained at Har Sinai. They didn't budge. All they've been doing for 10 months is preparing and building the Mishkan, and now they're inaugurating it. It's a huge celebration. It's a very happy day. I mean, I need you to realize this. Imagine you're a community and you're building a synagogue, and then there's setbacks and there's leaks, right? And there's things going on. And finally you build the synagogue. What a happy day for the whole community. There's going to be food and singing and dancing. It's going to be beautiful. That's our parasha. Our parasha, the Mishkan, is finally established. It stays up. And it's the 8th day of an inauguration process. The first 7 days was Moshe acting it out, teaching everyone how it's done. And finally now, on the 8th day, Moshe hands the project over to Aharon bechavod. Okay, very simple, very nice. But we will see now that it was actually a very big argument between two big rabbis. What is the date? What is the date on the calendar that this 8th day of the inauguration process was? Rashi says the date is Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the first day of Nisan, and it's on the first day of Nisan that it was established for good, and from that day on they began the avodah. So the 7 days of preparation, I'm going to ask you, the audience, okay? Take a guess. You can write down your answers on the side. The 7 days of the preparation that Moshe was doing, what were the dates of those 7 days of preparation? What was the date of the preparation? No, they weren't around the Mishkan yet. Now they finally built it. It's in our parasha that they finally put it up. So the 7 dates, it was... Oh, okay, hold on. Chanukah is a very good question. Hold on to Chanukah, okay? The dates, according to Rashi, is the last 7 days of the month of Adar. Okay? The last 7 days of the month of Adar, Moshe put it up, took it down, put it up, took it down, put it up, took it down. And finally, Rosh Chodesh Nisan was the 8th day. He puts it up, and it stays up. And that day, by the way, was a very happy day until something very sad happened. Anyone know what happened on that day? The day that it was inaugurated? The day that we finally had the Mishkan, the house of God? The shul is finally built? What a happy day! And then something happened that day, very sad. Anyone know? And we all do know about this, but maybe we didn't realize that it happened on this day. Something very sad happened on the day that we celebrated the inauguration of the Mishkan. And that is that the two sons of Aharon HaKohen died. Aharon, we know, had 4 sons: Nadav, Avihu, Elazar, and Itamar. And it was on the first day of Nisan, according to Rashi, the 8th day of the inauguration process, that Aharon's 2 sons died, Nadav and Avihu. And we'll get to that soon. That's also in our parasha. They died because they did something that wasn't supposed to be done. Again, not so clear. The pasuk says one thing, the rabbis explain it in different ways. Again, that needs to be understood. That's its own class. But Aharon's children died, and it turns out that according to Rashi, they died on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Because that's what the 8th day was. The 8th day of the inauguration process was the first day of Nisan. That's Rashi's opinion. Now, the Ibn Ezra argues. The Ibn Ezra says no. They did not inaugurate the Mishkan for the last 7 days of Adar, and then the 8th day was Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Rather, the inauguration began on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and that lasted for 7 days. And so the 8th day of our pasuk is also happens to be the 8th day of the month. So the mahloke between Rashi and Ibn Ezra is very simple, okay? If you're like, okay, Rabbi, you lost me with the dates, very simple. Either the 8 days began on the 23rd of Adar and it went to Rosh Chodesh Nisan, that's Rashi's opinion, or it began on Rosh Chodesh Nisan and it went till the 8th of Nisan, and it's the Ibn Ezra's opinion. Either way, everyone agrees to majority of the facts. Everyone agrees that there was 8 days of preparation. And everyone agrees that on the 8th day, Moshe handed it over to Aharon. The only question is, when did those 8 days begin? Did it begin in the 23rd of Adar, and then it went into the 1st of Nisan? Or did it begin on the 1st of Nisan, and it went to the 8th of the month of Nisan? Okay, now, again, does it matter? Halachically, I don't think so. I don't know that there's a halakha difference, but it's just good to know when was the first day that the... also, by the way, it turns out that this will affect when Nadav and Avihu died. When do we mourn their death? Is there yortzeit on Rosh Chodesh Nisan? Is that the 8th day? Or no, the 8th day is the 8th of Nisan, and that's going to be their yortzeit. Now, it is important to just pay attention to the psukim. If you come back with me to the last book, the end of the book of Shemot, chapter 40, pasuk bet. Chapter 40, pasuk 2. The pasuk says very clearly, black and white, Beyom hachodesh harishon be'ehad lachodesh. On the first month, that's Nisan, okay, good. And on the first day, Takim et Mishkan Ol Moed. God says to Moshe, on the first day of the first month, you will establish and erect the Mishkan, the tabernacle. So it says very clearly that the Mishkan was built on the first day of the first month. What does Rashi do with that? Well, Rashi is going to say that pasuk is referring to when it was built permanently. But for sure, the temporary putting up and taking down, that preceded the first day of the first month for 7 days. This pasuk's just talking about when you're going to establish it forever. Takim, it's going to go up and it's going to stay up on the first day of the first month. The Ibn Ezra is going to say, no, what are you talking about? It says you're going to put it up, and that's referring to the initial first day of the 8-day process, and each one is going to point to that same pasuk and explain it in a different way. Now, just to address the question that was asked on the side for a second, what about Hanukkah? Now, it's interesting, because according to our tradition, the Jewish people finished the entire building of all of the different parts of the Mishkan. They built all of the things and the vessels and the menorah, everything was done on Hanukkah. Chaf Hei Kislev. And actually, that day, they could have built it. They could have erected it, and it would have been that day that we celebrate. But Hashem didn't want it to be on that day, for whatever reason. Meaning, again, in the desert, the Jewish people were commanded the day after Yom Kippur to start building the different parts of the Mishkan. And they did. So for the months of the Tishrei, Cheshvan, and Kislev, for 3 months they were working like dogs, building and building and building, and they finally finished on the 25th of Kislev. And they could have built it right then and there. They had all the pieces. God said, no, don't build it, wait. Can you imagine? You have the building, it's up, but God says, no, don't go in. Don't put it up yet. Don't build it. Don't put it, don't put it together. Leave it disassembled. All right? And they waited. Tevet, Shvat, Adar, 3 months. 3 months they waited. Itching. Come on, let's go, let's do it, let's go. We have the thing, let's go build. No, wait. And by the way, if you're thinking and wondering why didn't God allow them to just build it right away when they had all the pieces ready? It's a very good question. And there are many answers to this question. One of the answers is that if we understand the Mishkan was a tikkun for het ha'egel, if it's true that the Mishkan was to rectify the sin of the golden calf, Rabotai, please tell me, what was the main sin of the golden calf? How did it happen? Right? Moshe said, I'm coming. They waited. He didn't come. And they got antsy. They got anxious. They wanted to build another way of serving God. They thought Moshe's dead. They needed a new leader. And if they would have just waited one day, because they were 1 day off, they miscalculated. If they waited 1 day, they would have avoided the entire sin of the golden calf. And so the main crime of Egel is patience. Patience. Wait, like we say in Arabic. Stenna. Wait a little bit. If they would have just waited a little bit, patience, rohi, just a little bit waiting, they would have gone right in. But they didn't have patience. I want it, and I want it now. And I want, right? They wanted it, and they wanted it now. They couldn't wait. And they went full steam ahead. Look how fast. In 1 day. Look what kind of ability people have when they're committed. They wanted it. They gathered all the gold. They went and gathered all the people. They built an egel in 24 hours. Unbelievable. What you could accomplish when you're committed. They were committed. It was for a bad thing, but they were committed. And Moshe comes down. The whole thing. They would have just waited 24 hours. Could you imagine? And by the way, that's life. That is life. In life, most of our mistakes that we regret could boil down to, I wish I would have just waited. Person yells at their child. They now harm that relationship. They yell at the spouse. They yell at one of their workers. Right? We get angry. And we are now a certain aspect of the relationship with that person. So much of that could be avoided if we just wait. You're angry. They said something. They did something. I get it. breathe. Just, wait 10 seconds before you respond. You know how many fights we could save? Do you know how many problems we could avoid if we just waited before acting out of impulse, before jumping down somebody's throat, before saying something and we regret it? Just wait a little bit. Patience. Wait a couple of minutes and you'll see the anger goes away. But that's the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara doesn't want you to go and impulse and do it. And it's a very interesting idea that we actually can save many of the problems in life if we just waited a little bit. The Jewish people didn't wait. And by the way, it's like that with a lot of the Averot. If you think about sins that we do, right? Chametz on Pesach. I can't. I need to eat pizza. I need to eat it. If you just wait, you'll see in a couple of days you'll be allowed to have pizza, no problem. Just wait. A person wants to be with their spouse, but she's not pure. Just wait. In a couple of days she'll be okay. You can go. You can do the mitzvah, do whatever you need. Just wait a couple of minutes, a couple of days. Patience. A husband and a couple that are engaged. Just patience. Many of the averot, it's just a little bit of patience that we need to exercise. Go wash your hands for netilat yadayim. Just a couple of seconds. Go get up. Go wash your hands. The food's not going to run away. No one's going to die if you wait a couple of seconds to go wash netilat yadayim. Many of the averot in life, many problems in life, many of the problems that we experience with people in our relationships, with God, with everybody. Sometimes just a little bit of patience goes a very long way. The Jewish people, if they would have waited, they could have avoided the entire saga of Chet HaEgel. David HaMelech, by the way, I want you to know, when he went with Bathsheba, right, that day that he saw her on the roof, and it was a sin that he did. Now again, we need to understand the sin. The sin is not as simple as we understand it. But whatever it was a sin. Actually, the rabbis say, Bathsheba was going to end up marrying David anyways. She was meant to be his wife. Her husband would have died and he would have married her legally. But he jumped the gun a little bit too quickly. Patience, David. And so it is with many averot, and we could go one by one. But many of the averot that are committed in the Torah, if a person just waited. Reuven, his mother died. Who is Reuven's mother? Leah. She dies. And now, Yaakov Avinu takes his bed. Made a mistake. Let's go back. His mother did not die. Okay? Scratch what I just told you. I made a very big mistake. Yaakov had 4 wives. Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, and Zilpah. Rachel dies. Okay? Rachel, his most beloved wife, dies. His bed, Yaakov, he can't be in 4 beds, in 4 tents at once. So he could only be in 1 tent. So where was his main bed, right? His Sealy, cushion firm, whatever bed he had, okay? Where did Yaakov put his bed? In which of the 4 tents? Take a guess. Very good. Rachel. Okay? His main residence was in the tent of Rachel. Now she dies. You got to move out. Where are you going to put your bed now? Three wives left. Leah, Bilhah, Zilpah. I mean, anyone would assume you go to Leah. She's the full wife. The other 2 are the maidservants. But no. Yaakov puts his bed in the tent of Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant. Reuven, the oldest son of Leah, is very, very offended. Excuse me? You're picking the maid over my mom? You're picking the maidservant over the real wife? I mean, it's one thing that you pick Rachel over my mom. Okay, I get it. And even that, it's questionable, but I get it. But now you're picking her maid over my mom? No. The buck stops here. Reuven goes into Bilhah's tent. He picks up his father's bed and he shifts it over to Leah's tent. He acted with haste. He was very angry. and he felt that there was an injustice, and this one act of Reuven cost him a lot. We need to know this, by the way. One mistake of Reuven, he lost everything. He lost the firstborn, the birthright. He lost the Bechorah. And at the end of his life, when Yaakov is on his deathbed, and he's blessing each of his children. This goes back to the end of the book of Genesis, of Bereshit. And he's on his deathbed. He calls over his 12 sons, and he's ready to bless them. And he begins with the oldest, Reuven. And he says, Reuven, Bechori ata. You are my firstborn, Reuven. Kohi vereshitoni. You are my strength and my initial vigor. My first seed. You are it. You are my first. Foremost in rank and foremost in power. However, Pahas kamayim al totar. Water-like impetuosity, you cannot be foremost, because you mounted your father's bed, and you desecrated him who ascended my couch. Says Yaakov to his son, you were quick to act. You were impulsive, and because of that, you lose your birthright. You are foremost no longer, Reuven. Take a hike. See you later. You made a very big mistake. You cannot be foremost because you mounted your father's bed. Yes, you felt there was an injustice. Yes, you felt like there was a crime committed against your mother. I understand. And we could discuss and we could analyze, and let's discuss. Let's have the discussion. But you acted very quickly. You were hot-headed, Reuven, and that's not a key to success. You cannot be the firstborn if you're going to act out of impulse. And you lose everything. So look how many things in the Torah, and again, there's many more, but a little bit of patience, a little bit of, let's think it out, could have saved so many problems for so many people. So the next time we are angry and we want to say something, we want to blurt something, be careful. You may regret it in 5 seconds. Breathe. Very nice advice. You ready? If you ever want to say something and you're angry, just wait 10 seconds. Count to 10. Breathe 5 times. And then say it. But wait a little bit, and we will see how sometimes waiting can save us a lot of heartache, a lot of problems. So this is, coming back to our parasha again, this is the difference between the Ibn Ezra and Rashi. The Mishkan was a tikkun for Het HaEgel. Okay, and the Het HaEgel, so going back to the question that we asked on the side, because the sin of the Egel was patience, that's all true. So God now needs to teach them patience. So you build the different parts of the Mishkan, you have everything lined up, everything is ready to go. It's the 25th of Kislev. Wait. Okay. You don't scare me, I'll wait. They waited a day. Wait. Alright, wait 2 days. Wait a month. Wait 2 months. Wait 3 months. Already the Jewish people are getting, oh my God, this was a heavy lesson in patience. It could have been built in Chanukah, but God wanted to teach them patience because they had to undo all of the sins that they made with the Chet HaEgel. The root of the problem was patience. So now they are applying heavy patience. Amazing concept. And by the way, according to many commentaries, God's way of making it up to the Jewish people. You're supposed to inaugurate in Chanukah, but they didn't. The 25th of Kislev, they couldn't inaugurate. So God gave them another gift on that same day, many, many years later, and that is the holiday of Chanukah. And on Chanukah, we inaugurated the Mishkan, the Beit HaMikdash again. That's what Chanukah means. Chanukah means to inaugurate. Chanukah Tamizbeach, right? they inaugurated the Bet HaMikdash on the 25th of Kislev. Is that day random? It just happened to be the day that the Jewish people beat the Greeks? Maybe not. Could be that God handpicked that day to be the day of victory because God owed them one. He owed them that date. He had to make it up to them. You should have inaugurated the Beit HaMikdash on the day, because they didn't, because he wanted them to wait. Many, many years later, though, he made it up to them and he allowed them to rededicate the Beit HaMikdash in the time of the Maccabim, the second temple. They rededicated the Beit HaMikdash on that very same day. Now, just to come back and we'll close with one more idea over here. Rashi, again, let's just come back home. What date is the 8th day of inauguration? What's the date on the calendar? The date is going to be Machloket. Rashi says the first day of Nisan. And by the way, Rashi is not making it up. He actually is getting it from the Chazal, from the rabbis in the Gemara. The Ibn Ezra doesn't like that. He has questions on it. And so instead he says it means the 8th day of the month, and that's when it happens. Okay. Seemingly, there's no proof for the Ibn Ezra, and he's just saying his opinion based on rationale. However, the Mizrahi, there is a commentary, not me, there is a commentary that lived many hundred years ago called the Mizrahi, and he is a very, very important commentary on Rashi. Okay? He wrote a book commentating on Rashi, explaining Rashi. And he wants to know, does the Ibn Ezra have anyone in the Gemara proving his theory that it was the 8th day of the month of Nisan? And he says, actually there is. There is a Tana, there is a rabbi all the way back from the Mishnah era. But to see it, he says, you gotta adjust a little bit your lens and take a look at this amazing, amazing machloket. Masechet Sukkah, page 25. Rabotai, there is a holiday that's going to come up in 3 weeks. And I'm going to wait and see who could guess. And don't say the Omer. It's not the Omer. Before the Omer, before Lag BaOmer. Anyone know what holiday comes up? It's my wife's Hebrew birthday, so I can never forget it. Very good. Pesach Sheni. Pesach Sheni. Are we familiar with that holiday or no? Okay, so we just celebrated Pesach. That's the first Pesach. Beautiful. There is actually though a makeup. Believe it or not, there's a makeup, and it doesn't exist by any other holiday. You can't make up shofar. If you missed it, you missed it. Sorry, wait till next Rosh Hashanah. Okay? You gotta dip the apple in the honey next year. You can't dip the apple in the honey a month later. Right? You can't make up Yom Kippur or Sukkot. But when it comes to the holiday of Pesach, there is a makeup. It's called Pesach Sheni. One month later, on the 14th of Iyar, you eat Masa, you eat Korban Pesach, and it's a makeup for whoever couldn't celebrate the first Pesach 1 week ago. What would be a reason that somebody cannot celebrate Pesach Rishon? What could be the reason for that? Give it a couple of seconds. What would be a reason that somebody would not be able to celebrate the first Pesach? Anyone know? Beautiful. Tum'ah. Like a lip read, Joe. They were tameh. Hazak Baruch. If you were impure on the last week, let's say, God forbid, a person had to bury somebody, a loved one. Now you're impure. You need 7 days to become pure. You cannot eat Korban Pesach if you're impure. So you cannot eat Korban Pesach the first month. So you have a makeup. A month later, you get clean and you celebrate Pesach Sheni. Okay? What's the source of this holiday? It's actually in our Torah. Perashat Beha'alotecha, we're going to read it in a couple of months. Perashat tells us that there were actually, in the second Pesach of history, 1 year after we left Egypt, we celebrated Pesach, and There were Jews that couldn't celebrate that Pesach. So they come to Moshe and they say, Moshe, our master, we are very hurt that we couldn't celebrate Pesach because we were tameh, whatever the reason is. We want to make up. Okay, yes, if you're sick in the hospital is also very good answer. And we couldn't celebrate the first one. We would like a makeup. Please, can we have it? Moshe says it's a good question. I gotta ask God. He goes, God, what do you say? God's like, yeah, let's give it to them. He says, all right, you're good. And 1 month later, they celebrate Pesach Sheni. Gemara Masechet Sukkah, page 25, wants to know, who were these people that were tameh? Why were they tameh? Why couldn't they celebrate the first Pesach? Again, here we are, camped around Har Sinai. We got the Torah in Sivan. We've been learning Torah all day long. We were building the Mishkan, and they finally erected it on the 1st of Nisan, on the 8th of Nisan, they erected the Mishkan. And now, all of a sudden, Pesach's coming along, and people can't do it. There are certain people that were tameh. Why should anyone be tameh? You may say, well, someone maybe died. But according to Rashi says, we have a tradition. We know in that first year, you know how many people died? 0. No one died around Har Sinai. So then how are there people that are tameh? If no one died, no one's tameh. So why couldn't they celebrate the first Passover? There are 3 answers in the Gemara. The first answer is, there were the people carrying the coffin of Yosef. Remember Yosef HaTzadik, when he died, where was he buried? Anyone know? Where was Yosef buried? In Misraim, in Egypt. And he, in the Nile, okay, in Egypt, and he told the Jewish people, when you go back to Israel, whenever that is, 200, 400 years, whatever, take my bones with you. And so Yosef and all of his brothers, they all died eventually. They were all buried in Egypt. And when the Jewish people left, they didn't leave empty-handed. They took Yosef's bones, and by the way, they took also all the other 11 brothers' bones. I don't know if we realize that. We think that it was only Yosef's bones that were taken. No, it was 11 and Yosef. So 12 coffins were being carried to Israel throughout the 40 years in the desert. Well, whoever's carrying that coffin, those coffins, they're tameh. Right? You're carrying a coffin, you become impure. So those people couldn't eat Pesach. They couldn't celebrate the first Pesach a year later because they're tameh. And so they needed to eat it a month later, Pesach Sheni. Do you like this answer or no? Can you please tell me why this answer should bother you? I'll give you a couple of seconds to write it on the side. This answer should not sit well with you. Very simple reason. Why do they need to touch the coffin? They didn't move. They were around Har Sinai for a year. They didn't travel anywhere. They could have left the coffin in a tent somewhere, leave it there, go, become pure. You have a whole year to become pure and to go eat Pesach with everyone else on the right date. What excuse do you have that you're tameh? Therefore, the Gemara says there are 2 other answers because they didn't like the first one. Answer number 2, it wasn't the people carrying Yosef's bones because they have no excuse. They had enough time to become pure. Rather, it's the people that had to carry Nadav and Avihu's bodies out of the Mishkan. Remember we said on this very happy day that we inaugurated the Mishkan? Beautiful, joyous occasion. Well, that day, 2 people died. Remember we said Nadav and Avihu? When they died in the tabernacle, in the Mishkan. They were inside the Beit HaMikdash. In the Mishkan, yeah? Someone's got to bring them out. You know who brought them out? Their cousins. Their names were Mishael and Elzaphan. Mishael and Elzaphan. They go in, they have to carry their cousins dead out of the Mishkan. It was very emotional, I'm sure you could imagine. They take the cousins, they carry them out, and they bury them. But now they just touched a dead body. they are tameh. And Pesach is coming up. They're the ones that couldn't eat Pesach with everyone else because they touched the dead body, and therefore they had to wait 7 days, and they didn't have enough time. They had to wait till a month later, Pesach Sheni. Now, let's calculate, everybody. If Nadav and Avihu died on the day that the Mishkan was inaugurated, and according to Rashi, what was that date? Please tell me, because I just spent 40 minutes giving a class on it, so please, for the love of God, somebody tell me, according to Rashi, what was that date? Thank you! The 1st of Nisan. So if you carried their body out on the 1st of Nisan to bury them, how many days from the 1st till the 14th? 13. That's more than enough time to become tahor. That's more than enough time to become pure. Because all you need is 7 days to become pure. Like quarantine, right? All you need. 7 days, you do certain, there's a certain procedure with the para aduma, you sprinkle it on them and they're good. So why didn't they have enough time? Says the Mizrahi, you see, maybe this opinion, and this, by the way, you know who says this opinion? That it was the people that carried out Nadav and Avihu's bodies? It wasn't a small rabbi. It was a huge rabbi. You all know his name. Rabbi Akiva. Says the Mizrahi, Rabbi Akiva must hold like the Ibn Ezra, that they died not on the 1st of Nisan, but they died on the 8th of Nisan, because that's the day that the Mishkan was inaugurated. And if you count 7 days from the 8th, you're going to hit Pesach. They did not have enough time to become pure, and therefore they're the ones that came to Moshe, and they asked Moshe, could we have a makeup date? And he said, yes, you have Pesach Sheni. Anyways, we have over here, again, big mahloket, Rashi, Ibn Ezra. Each one, turns out, each one has a source in Chazal, in our rabbis. What was the day of the inauguration? Was it the 1st day of Nisan? Was it the 8th day of Nisan? Everybody agrees, our parasha, which is called the 8th. What does the 8th mean? The 8th day of the preparatory process. And for 7 days Moshe was preparing. On the 8th day, it went up, and Aharon and his kids now are the ones doing the avodah. What that date was is a machloket. Was it the 1st or the 8th of Nisan? But everyone agrees to everything else. And let me just read the question over here. The para aduma was ready on, very good question, when was the para aduma ready? I want to say the 2nd day of Nisan. So 2nd day of Nisan, and that's it. They had it on the 2nd day of Nisan, and they had from the 2nd, they had 7 days, that's the 9th. That's more than enough time to become pure. Okay, so that's the proof for the Ibn Ezra that on the 8th day, that it must have been on the 8th day of the month, and therefore you need 7 more days, which doesn't give you enough time to become pure. Okay, but either way, again, beautiful lesson in patience. We should be zocheh to execute being patient in all our relationships, in all areas of life. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.